Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very informative show coming right up with special guest Katie Novak. And Katie's here today to talk to us about her new book, Let Them Thrive, a playbook for helping your child succeed in school and in life. Now, Katie is an internationally renowned education consultant, as well as a practicing leader in education as an assistant superintendent at a school district in Massachusetts. With over 15 years of experience in teaching and administration, she earned a doctorate degree in curriculum and teaching. So let's welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a pleasure it is to have you here. And gosh, your book is pretty impactful. You probably are getting such great response from people saying, we've been needing this for some time.
Well, it's so interesting because as a teacher and a lifetime educator, I've always had the opportunity to see the teacher's side of things. And, just how hard everybody's working and, the professional development, everything we're trying to do to impact the lives of kids. And now that I'm a mom, I also get to really experience the parent side of things by talking to my friends. And there is some sort of disconnect, I think, when you think about, parents and teachers and what we're trying to do for kids. And the more that I'm spending time with everybody, I'm realizing that we're really all trying to do the same thing. Every single person is trying to provide the best life they can for these kids. And so, I've written a lot for teachers trying to say, understand what parents are going through. And so this is kind of my first foray into saying, parents, this is what we're dealing with as educators. And, this is what teachers are up against. And if you joined forces with teachers, imagine the impact that we could make on kids.
Well, and so I have to ask you, because you've got this great background, being a mother, being a teacher, and having just this, huge background in education. How was it that you got started on this path of bringing all this together and developing Let Them Thrive?
I really started thinking about what does it take to impact kids. And a couple of times in the past few years, I've gone to conferences and people have asked, how do you get parents on board with this? Because what I talk about for education is called universal design for learning, and it's really about personalized education for students and giving students choices about what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn it and how they're going to share what they know. And it's really an innovative approach to teaching and learning. And so when dealing with teachers, sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, I absolutely love this idea. I'm worried about how parents are going to react to this. What are parents going to say when I start to say, students can choose how they want to learn this and what they're going to do. And, it's not going to be so predictable anymore. And so in my own school district where I'm the assistant superintendent, I started thinking about, how do we get parents on board? And they have just been absolutely open and hungry for information and really excited to see that what we're doing is going to help prepare their kids better for the future.
And so, so that's actually a great way to kind of pivot to my next question here, because kids are so diverse. How is it that the education system, the school system, can get behind children and start teaching them different styles of motivating them to learn better?
The really amazing thing right now is that everybody is in the corner of universal design for learning. So this is what is hot right now. This is what is endorsed through our public policy. And so really, if it's not happening, it should be more surprising. And so, the really interesting thing is to think about what the standards actually say. And so, as a mom, I'll be looking, on social media and people will say, oh, I hate this Common Core math, or, it's this new math. And the really interesting thing is there's literally no such thing as Common Core math. There's no math problems in the Common Core standards. All it is what are the outcomes. And so, for example, one of the outcomes starting when kids are really little is that kids will use more than one way to solve a problem. And so that is the only thing that the standard is really dictating. And so you think about how much freedom you have to say to students, what are all the different ways that you can use to solve this problem, and what materials do you need, and what resources do you need, and do you want to work together, or, what other creative ways can you think of to accomplish this problem? And, it really provides all students with an opportunity to really go down a road, to take a path, and to end up at the same destination when they all took different paths. And so, for parents, sometimes when they're frustrated with, oh my gosh, look at this homework problem, what they're actually looking at is a company, which is a for-profit entity, a company's interpretation of that standard. And, what's really empowering is all of the standards actually endorse this concept of UDL, which is really a framework for personalized learning. And so the book kind of explains, that teachers are kind of up against sometimes these curriculum adoptions where districts are saying, this is the curriculum you're going to use, when in fact there's many other journeys that they could take to get students to the same destination. And so, knowing that this is what is, written into federal legislation, I want to empower parents to fight for it, to say, if your kids are struggling or if they're bored, there is nothing wrong with your kids. Students are not disabled. It's our schools that are disabled. And having that mind shift is so critically important for our babies.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because, it seems like since when I went to school, there's definitely been a shift in looking at how kids learn and how we classify them as well. And some of these tags that the education system or parents or well-meaning teachers, whoever, labels children with can be very harmful for them in their later years.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is what are we really preparing them for? And so for a really long time, like when you and I went to school, we were really focused on the acquisition of knowledge. Like, how do we know things and bring them on, to further generations? And, what's really interesting is now, Siri and Alexa and Google do that. And so this concept that everybody just needs to be this receptacle of knowledge is really archaic. What students need is to know how to be learners. We need students to know how to set goals and to solve problems and to be creative. And every student is capable of that. And maybe those kids aren't going to be, traditional quote unquote good students, and that maybe their recall is not going to be, as impressive as another student's recall. But that doesn't matter because we always are going to have these tools at our fingertips. And therefore, we should allow students to use those, every single day in what they're doing as they, really are empowered to think about their own passions and their own strengths and to create a journey for themselves that is different from the journey that we used to set forth. Because again, if you're looking at, I would like to hire someone who is going to do exactly what I asked them to do in a very predictable way, then I'm going to hire a robot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and thank goodness they're making such transformations, because I know for me when I was in high school, parts of it were brutal, and it was just like, gosh, I'm just having a hard time and struggling. It's like math was not my thing. So it's so interesting that there's some recognition here and some changes are being made.
Yes, and it's so incredibly exciting. I get to walk through classrooms every single day from pre-K to 12th grade and to see what is happening in classrooms and to see how kids are enjoying themselves and getting to be creative. There's something that's so incredibly empowering about that. And so last week, for example, I went to a high school history class. And when I think back to my high school history classes, it was very much like we sat and listened, for hours at a time. We sat and listened to our teacher who would explain things and who would talk about what was in the textbook. And, that was basically the magic behind how we were successful. We had to remember what he said. We had to take really good notes. and then that was it. And, looking forward now, as I walked in and the teacher basically said, okay, I need all of you to know these important things about the Opium War. And so you decide how you want to learn them. So a group can come over here with me and I'll kind of break it down for you. You can look it up online. You can look in the book. It's totally up to you how you want to learn it. And then here's the rubric I'm going to use. So you decide how you're going to show me what you know on this rubric. And so some kids did speeches and some did PowerPoints. And when I went in, there was a group that did a sock puppet rap battle. And it was like the most unbelievable. They're the sweetest little things. They were like setting up tables and they all these cute little socks on their hands. And they actually pulled it off because they were students who probably like getting up and rapping, it might have been a little bit too much to stand in front of the class, but they had these tables in front of them, and it was like one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And to think like, what would we have done 20 years ago is we would have required everyone to read the same chapter in a textbook or to listen to a teacher's explanation, and then everyone would have taken a test. And then that was it. And it's like, well, how useful are those skills really? Because in my own life, I don't ever have to take a test.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we really need are more people who can be creative thinkers, like how you're explaining these kids are doing this rap song, for part of their work, their schoolwork there.
And it was amazing because that wasn't even a choice given by the teacher. It was really like, you tell me how you want to do it. And off the top of their heads, they're like, yeah, sock puppet rap battle. Like that would never be on my top 20 of ways that I would, prepare information. But even seeing my own kids, who are, I have an 8-year-old, twin 7-year-olds, and a 3-year-old. And just seeing the work that they come home with and how they're allowed to make it their own, and to know that, this is what we are calling for teachers to do. And, if parents are perceived to be a barrier, a really easy way is to find out, what is the best thing for our kids and how can we help usher them into this next generation. And then to kind of say to teachers, listen, let us help you with this. We want to be here by your side as you basically blow the doors off of what education has looked like for the last century, and to increase engagement. And that's the biggest thing is, when we talk about this concept of universal design, it really comes from architecture. And, Ron Mace, who is this architect back in the 80s, said, if there is somebody, for example, in a wheelchair who can't get into a building, the building is architecturally disabled. We can't say that a person is disabled because disability is really contextual. So, in a classroom, I might not be someone who, is going to fill the label, I guess you could say, of being disabled in a classroom. But if you put me on the top of a double black diamond ski slope, I am very significantly disabled in that environment. And so we talk about, universal design for learning is saying that if your kids are not learning, the schools are actually disabling. And there's 2 reasons why our kids don't learn. And one of them is access. They literally can't access the information. But the other is engagement, which means that it's just not interesting or relevant or authentic. And so, for parents out there who have students who, can do pretty well, they understand how to kind of play that compliant school game. The question is, do they love what they're doing? Do they love learning? Are they filled with a sense of wonder? Are they creative and motivated and self-directed? And if they're not, we would say that school is disabling for those students as well, because we want to set them up for a life, not that they're compliant and that they can, follow directions, but they are inspired to do something bigger. They're inspired to kind of find their own meaning of success. And that requires them to become a learner, somebody who can look at all the resources available and all the strategies available and pick the ones that play for their own individual strengths and that will get them closest to where they want to be. But also we want to arm them with the knowledge that anything worth achieving is not super easy. And so what are all the skills that they need to overcome obstacles and barriers? And, I love the lens of the institution. And to say, today I was looking at my baby sleeping. He was taking a nap, and I was just thinking, gosh, like I want the world for him. And, I know that every parent looks at their child and thinks the same thing. I want the world for this kid, and how dare schools get in the way of that?
Oh yeah, I would agree with you on that. And it's because there's so each of these children are so gifted in their own right. It's interesting for a school to say, well, you're gifted, you have issues. They're all gifted. They all have the ability to learn and do well.
Absolutely, absolutely do. And, as a teacher, I never met a kid that I didn't see some like spark of brilliance in. And, maybe they weren't the strongest reader, but they, were so charismatic or so musically gifted or just had such a way about understanding themselves. And, I would always say to parents, these kids will be fine. They will do well. They will move mountains. Like, we just have to get out of their way. And, I think for too long, American education has gotten in kids' ways by creating this institution that if you didn't follow and assimilate, in this one way, then you weren't thought to be successful. And, what's really interesting is, I don't know if you've heard of the book, Karen Arnold and Eric Barker recently wrote a book that really focused on what happens to valedictorians. And, I would say, as a parent and also as myself, this made me really excited because it looked at if we were doing school well, like if this was the institution that worked, then valedictorians would be far and above more successful than everyone else because they have, effectively played the game of school the best. And so they found 700 valedictorians and they created kind of all of these different measures of like, what does it mean to be successful? And, obviously it's not only monetary, but it's like how many people do you affect? How many other people's lives do you change? And then how happy are you? Are you doing what you want to do? And so they found all of these valedictorians and kind of asked the question, and the outcome was that zero out of the 700 really felt as though they were the success story that they wanted. And so the author said, okay, maybe that's just human nature. Maybe, people just are never satisfied. And so let's look a little bit deeper at this. And so then they went and found 700 millionaires, people who own nonprofit organizations, and your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Warren Buffett. And, they did the same thing. And these people are saying, yes, I am living the life I want to live, and I'm very happy. And their average college GPA was a 2.9, which is in most places, you can't even stay in your major if you're not a 3.0. And
yeah.
It's this really important book to say, hey, there's something here that says that we don't measure passion and drive the way that we're supposed to. And one of the takeaways of that work was that so often valedictorians just feel like they have to fit into a system, that they're really unwilling to shake it up, and that those of us, myself included, I was not a student, I never felt like there was only one way to do things because I never felt like I was really successful that way. So I've kind of had to find my own way, and that has allowed me to live this beautiful life that I'm happy every day and blessed every day to wake up and live, which is to teach teachers and to change education, not only for my kids, but for everybody's kids.
Well, and so is that what the definition of success is today then, is that the students are defining it for themselves?
Absolutely. And I think that it's always actually been that way. And I think we're just for the first time recognizing that, as adults, that, I always say to people I have friends who are really, really worried about how their kids are doing. And my kids are little. So, most of my friends' kids are really little. And I hear things like, oh my gosh, what second grade teacher should I request? And I'm like, okay, let's just step back. Let's think about what do you really, really want for your kids? Because I don't want a transcript of all A's. I want kids who are nice to each other. I want kids who work hard, and I want kids who can look back when they're adults and say, this is a life I'm proud of living. And when we can change that lens and say, there is not only one way to be successful, we start to open up possibilities for every single child to be successful, not just those who arrive to school ready to learn and be compliant and do things in a more traditional way.
Yeah. I think that that's so fabulous. And I know you also talk about there's lots of research that's been done on just how children think, how students think, and how this affects their brain.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And UDL or Universal Design is really based on like 30 years of research into what happens in the brain. And, one really neat thing is that, brains are wildly variable or different from each other. And even though there's like patterns in that variability, in order for anyone to learn, basically they have to know why they're learning, they have to know what they're learning, and they have to know how are they going to use that information. And so you think of any child ever who walks into a classroom and, they're going to say, well, why are we doing this? Like, that's a very good human question. And if educators don't have a really great answer for that, then do something else. Because we need to say, this is why this is important. And when we realize what the why is most of the time, we realize that the one-size-fits-all way of doing things is not going to be super effective because, one thing, for example, that a lot of students will fuss over is like, why are we all reading this book? And what's really interesting is none of our national standards require a single text. So there is literally nothing that students have to read. And it's really up to educators in schools to determine how to get students to understand how to comprehend text and how to understand themes. And therefore, you could really have students read anything and still meet all of the standards. And, to step back and to say, my son, Torin, who's in third grade, the other day we went to the library and I'm like, hey, buddy, look at this book. And he's like, Mom, reading's not my thing. Now, I was an English teacher and am like in love with books. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I just got punched in the stomach. And I said, what do you mean reading isn't your thing, buddy? I said, you love sports. You love Sports Illustrated. He goes, oh, I like to read nonfiction, but that's not reading. And I was like, whoa, let's back up, cowboy. I said, that's very much reading. Let's go look at the sports books. And then he was like all into it. And so that's his entry point. And so therefore, when he's at school, his third grade teacher is amazing about, well, what do you want to read? What do you want to write about? And it all started with sports. Like that was kind of where he entered. And then she was able to kind of push him a little further, like, oh, I see that you're doing all this work on the Patriots. Do you know that there's statisticians who work on that? And we could do math based on that, and so now he's like, Mom, do you know that like there's people who like they grow up and just do math on sports? And, so how much cooler is that than like a worksheet where you're just filling out math problems over and over again? But, you said that, math wasn't really, totally your bag, but guess what? You have a calculator and you're fine. So
you know what? I do. It's so funny because I'm so good at using Excel spreadsheets. I mean, I absolutely rock those. But back in the day, it's like, trying to do algebra. I'm like, oh, I can't do this,
Right. I went to a conference recently, and they said if you're giving tests that if given the access to Google and an Excel spreadsheet, the student should ace, it is a complete waste of your time. And I'm like, ooh, I love that because again,
I love that too.
Right. Like, why are we asking students to do that? And, and again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with understanding of how math works and the art of reading. But the reality is if some students can't access it in that way, so if you have a student who is visually impaired or you have a student who, has dyslexia or, some sort of print disability, or if you have a student who has really weak recall, for example, then reading a book is not going to be the best way to reach them. And therefore that book becomes a barrier. And with digital technology, you can say, okay, well, why was I even assigning the book? That comes down to the why. Our brains need to know why. And so, I'm like, well, I really want them to interact with ideas and to understand that ideas have power and that you can question them and that you can look them up and verify them. Okay, so I could do that with a movie or an audiobook or a regular book. And as a professional now, oh gosh, like it pains me to say the last time I picked up a hard copy of a book and read it. Because most of the time I am listening to it while I'm driving or I'm reading it on my phone, and so why do students not have the same opportunity to do what we do as professionals? And just to think how much more in love with learning would they be if that was truly an option every day, to say, the standard is that you understand how to interact with ideas. And so you choose something that you want to interact with. It could be a news article. It could be, something happening in the world. It could be, a book that you like. It could be an athlete that you like. Pull something up that you're passionate about, and then I can work with that with you. And seeing teachers do this well, like a lot of people say, gosh, like what does that even look like? And Let Them Thrive talks a little bit about what that looks like and what assessments might look like and how a classroom will change. And then also it provides teachers with parents with language to start approaching school boards and principals and teachers to say, this is really where the future is at with education. And not only is this the best thing for kids because they're enjoying themselves and they're creative and they're problem solvers, but this is actually now endorsed in every single level of federal legislation, which obviously, parents are not super privy to education law oftentimes, but the standards, the Higher Education Opportunity Act, if you have kids in college, the Every Student Succeeds Act, if you have kids pre-K to 12, like this is the foundation on which all education decisions need to be built. And, parents have the potential to change that very, very quickly. I love working with our school board in my district, and, they're so impassioned and excited to learn about, okay, tell me why this is good for kids, tell me what it is, and then tell us how to do it. What do you need us to do? And it goes back to the same things we need for students' brains, is if we can answer why and what and how, we get people who are purposeful and motivated and resourceful and self-directed. And we don't have people who will just be compliant and get through 12 years, answering questions and filling in bubbles, because where does that really land them? I mean, a kid only gets one chance at second grade and fifth grade and 10th grade, and we should give them the best opportunity to be successful in their life in every single one of those grades, because they don't get that back.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Katie Novak, author of Let Them Thrive, a playbook for helping your child succeed in school and in life. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. So we're here today with Katie Novak, who's sharing with us her new book, Let Them Thrive, a playbook for helping your child succeed in school and in life.
So, I know you talk about also in your book, gosh, it's just filled with so much information. You talk about students being able to express the knowledge in some way. And I'd love for you to kind of just share with us, I know we've been talking about that already, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about that for us, because I think a lot of times, families may be a little not sure how to look at the knowledge that their children have, and teachers as well, not really being able to assess hey, where can this person learn and shine the best?
I think it really comes down to coming back to that why, which is what actually is the goal. And so, when parents are familiar with the standards, to say, for example, let's say that, students in a science class really have to understand the process of photosynthesis. Why is that important? Because you have to understand that we're in this symbiotic relationship with plants, understanding just kind of this life cycle and what allows humans to thrive biologically. That's an important thing. And so, the first thing is, well, why is that important? And so saying to students, okay, so let's first talk about why it's really, really important to know this. So we take care of our planet, so we understand the importance of food and greens, and let's talk about also, what are some of the dangers, therefore, of things like, deforestation. So we start with the why. And then we say, ultimately, what you need to know is that, the process of photosynthesis, it's not so important that you understand all the vocab necessarily, but just how do plants allow us to stay alive. And so there's a lot of different ways you can learn this. There's some really good articles that you could read. There's some really cool videos you could watch. I'm happy to explain it to you. But we're going to sit and you're going to think about, create a personalized learning plan, which is how do you think you could learn this best? And, here's your menu or here's your buffet of options. And if you have a better idea, let me know. But ultimately, you're going to choose, how do you want to learn? What do you think you'd like to do? Do you want to work with a partner? Do you love books? Do you love videos? So on and so forth. And then to get to your question, it's, well, how are you going to show me that you actually met that original why, which is the ability to explain what the process of photosynthesis is. And again, my why is not that you learn all the vocabulary, because in all honesty, as an adult, I don't remember all of the words for every part of the plant. So I would say, one option or choice you have is to use this vocabulary sheet. And, these are the words that you may want to use. Also, here's an exemplar of what, I wrote, just so you can see, that I like writing. And so I wrote it this way. But also, you decide what's best for you. So do you want to record a video? Do you want to present in front of the class? If maybe that's a barrier for you, do you want to record audio? Because I could teach you how to make a podcast. Do you want to just come over here and tell me? Do you want to create a children's book? Again, you think about what the best way is for you, because the only real requirement for me as a teacher is that you understand this concept and that you're able to explain it in your own way. And so, what you'll realize there is there's going to be some choices or options that are not going to allow a student to explain it. So, for example, you could have a student who draws a picture of a plant cell. That's not explaining how it works, unless there's a pretty significant diagram and labeling and things like that. And so as a teacher, if I had a student who said, I would really like to draw a picture, I would say, okay, so I'm struggling with how you're going to explain to me how it works with a picture. Are you going to write words? Do you want to explain it to me with words? I can scribe it if you want to tell me, but how are we going to get there? Because I need to know that you understand why this is important. And basically that cycle over and over. And, I like to use an analogy of a dinner party to say, like, imagine that I called you tonight and I'm like, Marianne, I'm coming over. I'm bringing 10 guests. You don't know any of them. Okay. As a host, you would automatically just start thinking of barriers. You'd start going, oh my goodness, like I wonder if any of her friends, maybe they don't eat meat. Maybe some people are on a diet. I'm going to have a lot of options. And that comes really natural to us as guests. We kind of expect if I get invited to your house, I'll be able to eat something. And, what's really interesting is back in the 1970s, people just really put out a casserole. Like my meme used to make like a mean pot roast, but when she invited you over, that is what you were eating. Like it was not a question of if you ate meat. It was like you're eating burnt pot roast in a pressure cooker every Sunday night, whether you like it or not. And we don't casserole teach anymore, and we don't casserole serve dinner, because if you had a party and you didn't know which guests were coming, you would not just go for the casserole. You really start thinking about how can I make something like a salad bar or a pasta bar or like a deconstructed taco thing so everybody can have options and choices, because individually, like we're all going to need different things to really feel full and to feel like satiated and to feel happy about being at your house. And so, I always say that traditional education is kind of like casserole teaching, whereas everybody gets the same thing on their plate. And again, it doesn't work, because you can't really give me a compelling argument as to why I have to eat that pot roast, because your why for inviting me over, well, in this scenario, I invited myself. But for your why for inviting me over would be, I want you to eat a plate of food. I want you to have a good time. And I want us to have time to like connect. And, teaching at its core is emotional work. And how can teachers get the time they need to actually connect with students and to have those really important conversations, that say, I understand that you want to do it this way, but I'm struggling with how to help you do that. You can't do that when you're up in front of the classroom talking for an hour. And so this idea of moving from casserole teaching to a buffet is really what personalized learning is that your child, whether he or she is 3 or 25, is able to see a buffet of options and is really empowered to make a plate, to say, what is it that you need to eat in order to feel like you're like really a part of this party? And, that is what inclusive education is that every single child has a right to be educated with their peers in an environment that challenges and supports them. And that is, a belief in equity and social justice. And we have to fight for that. So every single child has the opportunity to be really wildly successful in his or her own way.
I love that. And so then it brings me to my own next question for you is, why is failure a gift? Why is, when we fall down, why is that something that would be considered a gift in this circumstance?
Well, I think failure is the best teacher, because if I go to your house and I say, you know what, those figs look really good. I'm going to eat an entire bowl of figs, and then I'm sick for a week. I now know figs are not the best choice for me. And like that's a lesson that I experience. And it's the same thing with students. If our goal is we want them to learn how to be learners, we're preparing these levies for jobs that don't even exist yet. So this concept of like we need them to be open to, okay, this is my goal. Here's all the resources I have available. Here's all the strategies I know about. I have all these opportunities to collaborate. How do I get to the goal? And what you realize is that success is a really, really messy road of a lot of like learning from failure. And so, you'd say to a student, okay, what is the best way for you to learn this? And let's say that you have a little lovey who's like, I'm just going to say reading because my best friend chose reading. And then when it comes time to give this presentation, this child has no idea, how to explain what they read. That's something really empowering about that self-assessment to say, okay, like I really liked working with my friend, but that wasn't a really great way for me to learn. And so next time I probably shouldn't pick that. and or I should, either not pick that or to create a better strategy to do that. And so, this concept, I bet most parents have heard of this concept of like personalized learning. And that's essentially this buffet concept that, students are given options and choices and then are given the opportunity to choose, again, how they're going to learn, how they're going to share what they know within the confines of those standards. And, what really great UDL practitioners do is they focus just as much on reflecting on choices as making those choices, because it's all about, well, this was my personalized learning plan. This is, what I chose for the resources. This was what I chose for the strategy. And then looking back on it, it was, well, how does your input relate to your output? And so did you make effective choices? Did this allow you to be really successful? When I was in that history class that I was telling you about, where there was the sock puppet rap battle, there was a group of girls who actually tried to do an interpretive dance, and she's like, "Are you sure you want to do it?" And they're like, "Yes, we can like change the music based on it, and we can have it almost like poetic, like up on slides, and we can share like the biggest point of view from like the British side and the Chinese nationalist side, and then we'll like create this dance." And so she's like, "Okay." And after like 3 days, they're like, "This is not going to work. We can't pull it off. Can we change it?" Absolutely, you can change it, because the idea was amazing, and we're so glad that you took the risk. But the more they thought about it, the more they said, this is not the best way to kind of meet this task at this time. And I think there's something amazing in that, because, again, I've tried things professionally that haven't landed that well. And what do I have to do is I have to adapt and reflect. And, again, that is a gift in of itself. And, one other really big part, if you were to Google right now personalized learning, the two words that would come up the most often are voice and choice. And so we've talked a lot about choice. Is we provide options for students for how they're going to learn, how they're going to share what they know. We give them options for really thinking about why this is important. But then where does this voice part comes in? And this comes from, I really need to understand what my learners need so I can create the right options on the buffet. So, when I'm saying, hey, I'm coming over with 10 friends, you would be a lot better off for your planning if you were to say, well, what kind of food do you like? Or, did I go with a certain theme? And that's voice. And so saying to students, at the end of every assignment, how did I do here as a teacher? And, what choices allowed you to be really successful, and what choices do you wish that you had that you didn't? For example, like working together or bringing in your own device. And then your buffet can get bigger and bigger as you're empowered with these other voices. And so, as an assistant superintendent and a professional development provider, I work with teachers all the time, and my goal is to help them understand why UDL is important, what it is, and then how you start implementing it in your classroom. And I'll take big risks sometimes, go big or go home, and I'll try some things. And every time there's a break, so normally about 4 times, during a day-long presentation, I'll stop and I'll say, okay, I need to know how engaged you are right now. I want you to think about everything I'm doing and all the options and choices that you have right now. And then you're going to tell me, like, how am I doing with giving you options for engagement? So, do you feel like the things that I'm offering you are relevant and authentic and meaningful? Are there options to work together? Are there coping options like having breaks and snacks and things like that? And then no matter how you think I fare, I want you to tell me one thing I could have done better. And the magic of this statement is to always start with, it would be cool if. Because I learned the hard way from teaching 7th grade for a very long time. I was with 7th graders for a decade. If you just say, tell me how I'm doing, you better have very thick skin when you're talking to 13-year-olds because they'll tell you how you're doing. And so I would always say, okay, lovely, tell me how I'm doing, but say it would be cool if, and they'd be like, it would be really cool if you didn't go through the explanations in such detail. It would be really cool if one of the options was to sit with you and go through it because we could have figured it out on our own. And really that's a micro failure. I have failed them in some way, and I still do it professionally every time. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds of presentations, and I will always get feedback I have never gotten before. which shows that there is no ceiling on what it means to be successful. And if you don't open yourself up to allowing other people to say, what could I do better for you? How could I create a better learning experience for you? You can look at that in one of two ways. You can look at that as I've failed, or you can look at that as an amazing opportunity to be better. And like that concept of expert learning is what we want to instill in our students is, when you reflect on the personalized plan that you created for yourself, and you're really willing to say, you know what, I messed up here, or the teacher made a really good point about what I should do next time, you can look at that as failure, or you can look at it and say, wow, I have a whole lifetime now to make better decisions and to try out this strategy. And like there is no stopping me if you can pick kernels and diamonds like that every single day. And so that concept of what does it mean to thrive, it is a child who learns how to be motivated, who learns how to set goals, and who sees learning as really a vehicle to be successful. And we're not talking about successful on a test, or successful on a transcript, but to say, wow, this thing that I am required to do for a minimum of 12 years of my life will actually allow me to live the next 60 the way I want to live it. Like that is a privilege and a gift that many people in this world would give anything to have. And we need to really wrap that up as the present it is, to allow students to see that.
Well, and I love how you make it so that the students are included. There's this, it's like this community. They've got collaboration going on. So all these new ideas are breeding as they're being able to go ahead and finish a project or choose the way they wish to learn. And I love how you're bringing that more forward.
Yeah, and again, all I am right now is one of the messengers because this is out there.
Mm-hmm.
What I would love for every parent and teacher to know is when I present to teachers, all over the world, I have never, ever met a single teacher ever who wasn't doing the best they knew how to with what they had.
Oh, yeah.
Teachers, they create this life for themselves because they love kids, they love learning. And if they're missing the mark, if they're not there yet, it's because they don't know how. Or, again, we go back to, I'm like a broken record on this, they don't know why the change is important for kids. They don't know what Universal Design for Learning is, which, again, is this framework that provides a set of principles, that says you have to provide multiple means of engagement. You have to put out options to get students engaged. You have to provide multiple means of representation, which is multiple ways for students to learn, whether it's going to be text or video or audio, and then multiple means of expression, which is we have to give students opportunities to share what they know in unique ways. And to do that, we also have to do the same thing for our teachers. And, the real privilege that parents have here is to focus on teacher professional development. And, if we believe so much in the power of learning to transform opportunities, then we have to invest in our teachers better. Because, you have these teachers who are in these pockets who are saying, okay, this is the way that I was taught to teach, and I have these principals who are telling me to do this, and so, I'm going to do it because I want these kids to be successful. And there's just so much research now that, that's a really great way to deposit information into students who are, I guess you could say, neurotypical or who arrive ready to learn. And that number of students gets smaller and smaller and smaller as our world becomes more inclusive and diverse. And there was a research that was done in 2010, and they basically asked a bunch of students to say, how interested are you in school? And something really depressing, 80% of students said that they were bored in school. And then when I asked them why, 80% felt it was the subject being taught. And it was oh my gosh, again, if you think about all the different countries all over the world who are fighting for education, for free public education, mm-hmm. and we have it, and people are saying, gosh, this is a waste of my time, this is so boring. It's because we're doing it wrong. And, so to say to teachers, there is another way. And please, please, once I make an argument as to why this is so important for kids, why this is important for you, here's a million different ways you can learn what it is. You can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can go to conferences, you do book studies, observe other teachers that are doing it really well on the teaching channel. And, when we provide all these options and then support them with how, we end up seeing classrooms that are transformed. And, it's a symbiotic relationship, because when parents understand why, this one-size-fits-all packet is not going to meet the needs of kids, they can then go on behalf of a school board and say, our teachers need better professional development. This is a requirement right now. It is endorsed in the standards that you're requiring teachers to teach. It is endorsed in the federal legislation that provides funding for our schools. We need to fight so our teachers know why this is important and know how to do it, because that's the way that you can change a system. If we rely on individual teachers to learn about it on their own, we're just going to have these random acts of improvement, or teachers who, are really empowered and understand how to do it. And that's great, because they're ready for it. But what about the teachers who haven't heard of it yet, or who aren't supported by their systems? And it is public education, which means every single person, listening to this, every person in this country actually has a say in how we do it. And when you learn, that there is a framework that is there for the taking, to say our students deserve a personalized education that allows all of them to use their individual strengths and to be empowered to be creative, self-directed problem solvers, where they can say, this is the best thing for me, and then make a mistake and say, you know what? Awesome. I learned that was not the best thing for me. When we can create a system that is just really about how do we create a community of learners as opposed to a classroom of automatons who can get 30 of 30 on a multiple choice test and then go on to be competing with robots who can do that much quicker. What are we really setting them up for? And, as a mom, I know that I see my kids loving and enjoying school. And, I am so lucky to be a part of a community where I am the assistant superintendent where my kids go to school. And so I get to work with their teachers. And, when I first came to the district, there was only 18 and a half hours of professional development a year, which is very little if we're trying to change teacher practice. And over time, by working with our families, by working with our school board, for saying this is why professional development is so important, this is what we want to teach teachers how to do, and this is how we're going to do it, we were actually able to, and this was 100% on our school board for being amazing advocates for all the parents in our community, is they actually went and changed the school calendar, and our teachers now get 78 and a half hours a year. So there's a half day every other Friday, so we can allow our teachers to be learners, and that has allowed us to change the district. And what's really amazing about this is even though we are not in any way responsive to standardized testing, meaning that we do not endorse preparing for standardized tests, we don't require that from teachers. Our scores year after year after year have gone up so significantly because our kids are thinkers. And when they're thinkers and they're learners and you put them in front of any measure at all, they're going to say, okay, I know myself pretty well. This is how I'm going to try to do it. And I'm going to do the best that I can. And, let's see what I got. And a student who is a learner, who is purposeful and motivated and resourceful and strategic, is going to do better than any student ever who sits with packets and practice tests for an entire year, because not only do they not know how to learn, is they don't know how to think. And, we're preparing them with old tests. And the funny thing is we don't know what the new test is going to look like. So we have no idea what we're even preparing for. So John Mundor, who is this amazing EDL educator, he's a professor in the University of Florida. He always says, if given the opportunity, I will always teach in a very accessible way for an inaccessible test than to teach in an inaccessible way for an inaccessible test. And that test is not our maker. And, right now we serve children. We do not serve a test. And the best way that we can serve our kids is, again, to inspire them and teach them how to learn and to get them to be engaged into what does it mean to use information in a way that allows you to meet your goals. And that right there, like that's like going back to Socrates and Plato, like that is the purpose of knowledge and thinking, is because it's a beautiful, beautiful journey that will lead you to a place that no one else has ever been.
Well, and you're so preparing all these children for these life skills that otherwise they wouldn't develop, and you're starting them out early in how to do this.
Yeah, and imagine though if you could have started out early. Like when you think back to the best parts in your school, it's going to be like these projects here or there. What do you really remember about your 12 years? It was never lectures. It was never, a book. It's like the opportunity to collaborate and create something. And every day is an opportunity for us to create these new experiences. And so, I think that the biggest reason why, I wanted to dive into this concept of Let Them Thrive is because as a parent, I am like fired up and excited about this change. And so few people know about this change because it really kind of runs in the education community, like just how I'm not super aware of, new coding procedures in computer science, because no one has ever told me why it's important for me. It's this, what if there was a way to get more parents to understand why this is important and what it looks like, and then how to begin to advocate for it, how to begin to bring up at school board meetings and with teachers and by having book clubs and saying to friends like, hey, what does your kid's schooling look like? I don't think it's supposed to look like that anymore. And if we across this country could start having those conversations, I think that parents could actually change education a lot faster than it would ever change from the inside out.
You really know your stuff, Katie. If there's a school district that would like to bring you out to, teach their teachers, go through a talk or something along that lines, how could they get in touch with you to do that?
Well, I have a website. It's katienovakudl.com, and I actually am still very, very lucky and blessed to be working almost full-time in a school district. So I actually work as a .8 assistant superintendent. So my availability is not, it could never meet all the needs of these amazing schools in the whole country. So the great news is there's an amazing organization also that I would be happy to endorse and connect you with, which is called the Center for Applied Special Technology, and they're actually the founders of Universal Design for Learning, and there is a much bigger reach and a much bigger team there. But also I have some amazing, amazing colleagues who would fit any possible scenario that you would have. So, whether you're looking to share this with administrators or parent groups or school committees or elementary school or college, definitely reach out to me. Again, it's katienovakudl.com, and I can definitely connect you to a perfect person for you and your organization. I can also let you know some amazing schools who are doing this really well, because some people's first question is, well, I want to see a school who's doing this. Like, is this really possible? Is this, this UDL learning topia, is it possible? And so, any question you have, I would be happy to reach out and to have a conversation. Just as, UDL provides options, there are many options to connect with me. If you go to my website or, you go to my email, I'd be happy to, to give you a call. We can text, we can email, I can Google Hangout. I'm available in a lot of different ways. I mean, I'll send a carrier pigeon if I need to. But this work is so important. And I'm really, really passionate about scaling it. And there's a group of people who also write about UDL who are amazing educators, and they're really prepared to share this as well. And so, just knowing that there are literally options for any parent or any school or any teacher to learn about this. And I would be so happy to start that journey with anyone.
Well, and also they can pick up your book, Let Them Thrive, and that's available on your website and all major retailers, correct?
That is correct.
How exciting. Well, Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today and to share your wealth of information. We could tell you're passionate about this. My goodness, you're getting us all fired up. And I know everyone wants to go pick up their own copy of Let Them Thrive. But, thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
No, it has been my pleasure, and again, you go enjoy your greatest journey, and again, for anyone who's listening, the next time that, your kids give you any trouble, always step back and think, why is this important that they do it? What do they need to know? And are there any other ways about how they could show me what they know? And really that is like the magic way to tap into the brain of any of our wonderful little birds that we have.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk with you about your new book, Let Them Thrive. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.